And welcome back to a fresh episode of the Business Growth Show. I'm your host, Sam Dunning, co-owner over at webchoiceuk.com. And if you haven't yet, check out my weekly emails where I share actionable website and B2B marketing tips, useful podcasts, goodies, and more. You can give it a shot over at businessgrowth.email. So joining me today, I've got Kat Anderson. Kat's the head of international marketing over at Sprout Social. Kat, welcome to the show. How are we doing?
Hi, Sam. Lovely to see you. Yeah, I'm doing great today. Thank you. It's supposed to be the most miserable day of the year, but it's actually quite sunny here in Ireland. So I don't know what's going on. That's doesn't make sense.
Signs of a great day. Yeah, we've actually got a rare sunny day after like a ton of rain and hail and everything you could name under the sun weather-wise. So yeah, nice to see some sun shining. But today we're going to be chatting why B2B marketing should get prospects emotional, which is it should be a fun episode. Some people might be tuning in thinking, what the heck does that mean? Like, does that mean they need to start bawling their eyes out? Do they need to laugh? Do they need to do something in between? So first and foremost, Kat, what the heck does actually getting emotional with your marketing mean?
Well, I mean, I think it's not, we're obviously not trying to get people sobbing, but I mean, maybe also that sometimes works as well. Basically, emotional marketing is exactly as it sounds. It's using emotion to actually help assist sort of the buying process. Now, that sounds incredibly mercenary, but it's been proven time and time again that when people are making decisions, a lot of the time emotion does play quite a big part of that. In fact, when people are making any kind of decisions at all, emotion plays a huge role in it. And typically in B2B marketing, we kind of, I don't know what it is about B2B, but things suddenly get very stuffy and very, it feels like we're selling into corporate like buildings rather than actual human beings who we're trying to connect with. And that whole emotional side of the buying process is woefully neglected. Last year, there was loads and loads and loads of reports that came out that showed that basically incorporating emotion and trying to make your prospects laugh or trying to make them have some kind of emotional reaction would yield amazing results for pretty much all industries, but particularly in B2B because it's so neglected. You have a real opportunity to stand out. So yeah, and the B2B Cannes Lions Award came out last year for B2B, and they, I think, were very interested in emotional campaigns with that. So, it's the hot topic. I'm telling you.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird, right? Because it feels like B2C brands, especially with the era of TikTok where we're in, where they're just going crazy. They're experimenting like mad, like all these different short form content, trying a bunch of different things, getting relevant influencers in their field to promote their goods in an educational but entertaining manner. But then there's some B2B companies that nail it for sure, but the majority of B2B companies are still doing the same thing they've done for 10 years because it's almost like they're scared, they're kind of stuck in a bubble and they feel, oh, B2B is super corporate. We're not really dealing with normal people. We're dealing with businesses. So we have to be super smart, super formal rather. And it's a strange one, right? I mean, it's almost like a mindset thing, isn't it? I feel anyway. I don't know what your thoughts are on it.
No, I definitely think so. And I think with B2C, there's just a bit more of they're a little bit more, inclined to take a bit of a risk, even a calculated risk to experiment a little bit more. With B2B, typically the contracts are going to be a lot bigger. There are going to be more approval processes baked into the process as well. So you've got to get more heads above you nodding yes to your crazy half-baked idea, and that's where a lot of the times things get shut down. And so I think B2B just is a little bit more risk averse because there's a little bit more to lose, or that's what the perception is anyway. But in fact, as I say, there's loads to suggest that actually I firmly believe this is not only at the minute. I think at the minute this is something where you can get an early adoption advantage by doing this and by trying to incorporate it into your marketing strategy. But I soon think what's going to happen is this is very going to quickly change into where you're going to be disadvantaged if you don't do this with your marketing strategy. Because I think how people are interacting and buying things has also changed quite a lot after the pandemic. I think everyone was very isolated from each other. And, even within the corporate world, then when all the Zoom meetings started coming on and people saw that people were wearing their pajamas on the bottom half and business suit on the top, the
Yeah.
human side of business kind of came in a lot more. And I think as isolated as we were looking for more connections, more human connections. And I think that that is absolutely spilling into the B2B world at the minute.
Mm. Yeah, it's a funny one. I mean, the way I see it is almost if you're not adding these things, if you're not being different to every other B2B company, B2B organization, it's almost like you're not standing out, because so many companies do the same stuff, whether that's on social, just resharing blog posts, sharing the events
Yeah.
they're up to and that kind of stuff. And it's like, I've seen this thing thousands of times, whether it's on LinkedIn, Twitter, or whatever social channel. So it kind of, your mind almost just blanks it, because you just see it from
Yeah.
every org. Whereas when one company does something a bit different, it stands out massively. And like you said, B2C has a lot more flexibility. They tend to be a lot more experimental. But B2B in most of the time is a longer sales cycle, typically bigger ticket items that you're trying to deal with. And there's usually multiple stakeholders involved, the larger the sales cycle, and the larger the ticket of the item. However, doesn't mean you're not dealing with people who, like
Exactly.
I say, to the root of this show, that they're still emotional. So with that said, how do these things we've talked about so far, like how does getting our prospects emotional, how is that going to impact our bottom line as a business or our revenue, do you think?
So yeah, so basically it's right. The one thing I actually really want to quickly talk about with that though is, so if you're getting them emotional, so Sam, say I'm trying to sell you something and company X is also trying to sell you the same thing,
Yeah.
but during sort of the prospecting period, you sort of see some of our marketing and you laugh. And especially if it's on social media as well, like say it's on LinkedIn, we're constantly posting, whether it actually is maybe really helpful content or really funny content or really thought-provoking content, you will actually start to have a neurological reaction. And that's why social media, I think, is also really good for this, because you have that frequency. So you will start to go like, Kat Anderson's stuff is always really like funny, say for example, or it's always, there's always good value from that. So then when you actually get to that RFP process or whatever, decision
Yeah.
making process is, you already actually have that bias built in where you're like, oh, I've seen their stuff on Instagram and
Mm.
like it's really good. And that, I mean, it would be great if we all were unbiased creatures, but we're not. So I think like oiling the wheel with a little bit of bias is always really, really good when it actually comes to like making a decision and putting ink on a contract. But in
Yeah.
terms of how it actually affects your bottom line, well, I do actually have some figures here. So we did some work last year with LinkedIn Creative Labs. And basically, at the minute, 71% of B2B ads are likely to generate no sales. Well, that was in 2021. So that's like, if you're just sort of generally thinking about average B2B, they just don't generate sales. Like it's very hard to tangibly tie them back to revenue.
Yeah.
However, whenever you start to use emotions, so LinkedIn did this amazing report basically where they analyze, and because they have the different types of emotional responses that you can do, so there's like celebrate, love, support, all of the little emojis,
Sure.
they were able to analyze all of these different industry brackets, different, whether it's software, whether it's luxury goods, whatever it was, but with particular focus to B2B and across awareness, consideration, and absolutely right the way down to conversion. It improved click-through rate, it improved engagement rate, it improved form fill rate, followers added year to date. It improved absolutely everything. And so ultimately it was considered that by having this magnifying effect on every single part of your funnel, you're getting more leads straight into the hands of the salespeople.
Yeah. It's a funny one. Like I've got a few examples that I've shared on the show, I think, before. Like for a while ago, our company WebChoice were wanting to try. So we focus on inbound, right? Websites, SEO, attracting prospects to ourselves and our clients. Now we wanted to try some outbound, and I naturally was biased towards one company purely because I'd seen the two founders posting on LinkedIn for like 6 months. And
Yeah.
most of their stuff's quite funny. Like they joke around cold calling and outbound and things like that. But because I'd seen them in the feed every day, like showing funny stuff, showing tips, insights, ideas, video clips, and all this stuff, I literally thought, well, I'm going to ask them straight away. I don't
Yeah.
even, in this case, I don't even need to search around, compare vendors, because I've been seeing them in my feed, because I trust them. They've entertained me, providing they're not tens and tens of thousands, they're half reasonable with their rates. Probably just going to inquire with them.
Yeah.
If I'm happy with what they say, probably use them. So it's like you nailed it on the head by saying you build an emotional bias if you are seeing a company that's actually giving you, I guess in my case, it was a little bit of value, a little bit of entertainment, a little bit of a concoction of all those things, which
Yeah.
then made them the top choice in my mind.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good example because, again, there's a real danger, I think, and my past life as, working in content marketing and copywriting, I think there's a real danger in B2B of falling heavily on the side of business jargon, which actually sometimes starts to become a little bit of like an invisible language. You don't really know what people are saying anymore.
Mm.
Whereas if you have a company like what you've described, like I think as well, I was lucky enough to meet Tom Boston last year. So Tom Boston works for SalesLoft, and if you're on LinkedIn at all, I'm sure you've seen him. So he's based in the north of England, and I believe SalesLoft's value prop is that they help salespeople do their job better. Now he's probably going to kill me that that's not exactly
Mm.
what they do, but what Tom Boston does is that he, as an individual, has started to make these hilarious videos, just sort of encapsulating the trials and tribulations of being a salesman, and it's a real warts and all sort of that's why it's funny, because people will see it and they're like, oh my goodness, that's absolutely the truth of it. It's not all like, we're killing it all the time. It's that there's struggles and stuff, and he's become really successful from doing that because not only does he make people laugh, but because he's embodying the problem and the actual lived in experience of his target
Mm.
audience, it also creates trust that they see it and go like, okay, well, they really do know what they're talking about and they're being really honest about it. Another really good B2B that I think really nails this unbelievably well and have been doing it for a long time is MailChimp. So
Yeah.
MailChimp, I think, infuse humor throughout their entire product, through their whole customer journey, which I just think is fabulous, and again, they really understand the end user, and they bake little jokes into the actual product. So from like the beginning to the end, it's a really consistent, like light, fun, enjoyable experience where email marketing can usually be quite stressful and terrifying, actually, whereas MailChimp make it really fun. So there's some people out there doing it really well, but they are establishing themselves as industry leaders because there's very little competition.
Mm. Yeah, it's a fair point. And something you kind of alluded to there with the Tom Boston at SalesLoft example is they're almost relatable.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of, whether it's people themselves or companies, are almost scared to be vulnerable. Not in the when I say that, I mean not necessarily to say everything that's wrong with them, but just to share some flaws. Like in Tom's case, he's like sharing the ups and downs of being a sales rep and like the
Mm-hmm.
really bad parts, which might be getting sworn out on a cold call, or the really good parts, which might be booking a meeting, winning a deal, helping a client, whatever. Whereas a lot of businesses just want to make everything sound like it's super great, super squeaky, it's doing really
Yeah.
well. Whereas when you actually start getting to the nitty gritty, like you mentioned there, then people are like, oh, you're actually a real person and you're going through the same kind of things I'm dealing with. And I suppose that's when this kind of trust is built, and
Yeah.
that's when the emotional level kicks in. And that's when people, I suppose, subconsciously start thinking like, this is someone that I can trust and I'm probably going to follow them a bit closer now.
Yeah, totally. Because again, if you're thinking, so say you're selling software, you obviously want the software to be squeaky clean and wonderful, but we are all flawed humans. No matter what your corporate mask is about how wonderful you are, everyone has brought times where, especially actually when you're buying a new bit of software, in that particular example, a new bit of anything for your business usually has a few bumps on the way to you being like a pro user of it. Like it takes a little bit of getting used to. So if you know that somebody is presenting themselves in that vulnerable way, in that way to say like, I don't get everything right all the time, or I really understand where you're coming from, it's like immediately the person you're going to want to do business with. It's just actually fascinating that I just really love this topic because it is fascinating to me that more companies don't do this, because it seems like such a no-brainer. But I think you're really correct, Sam, in bringing up that vulnerability piece, because I think people can be a little bit afraid to show that sometimes. But actually, I actually think right across our lives as humans, the more vulnerable we are, actually you get 10 times back for it. Like people really react quite well to it, because I think it is, and Lord help me, this is such a buzzword, but it's authentic. Like,
Yeah.
I know that is such a buzzword, but I think true authenticity, you know it when you see it. And if someone is actually being sincere, you can tell.
Yeah, yeah. It's like one of those things, right? So LinkedIn, a lot of people that perhaps haven't used it as much or are maybe trained by their company on LinkedIn think it's a super corporate B2B social media site. And it is a B2B site. It is a B2B social
Hmm.
network. But the people that I know, because we've interviewed hundreds of people on this show, right, over the years, the people I know that are actually doing the best on LinkedIn, and I mean not just talking a good game on LinkedIn, but generally generating a lot of inbound ops and serious revenue, are literally telling it how it is. Like they're messing
Yep.
around on LinkedIn, they're telling the highs, they're telling the lows, they're giving some good education, good value, good tips along the way, but they're not like being corporate in inverted commas, as it were. They're sharing everything. Like they're possibly even sharing like their own company's revenue, the things they're doing each day, the tips they're learning, the experiments they're running, all this kind of stuff. And those are some of the people that are doing the best, that I've
Hmm.
seen anyway, hands on the platform, that are actually generating good revenue from it. So that's like a big takeaway. But with that all said, anyone that's tuning in, or businesses that are tuning in, that are listening or watching and thinking, this all sounds quite good. I'm kind of getting the feeling that getting prospects emotional with our marketing could be worthwhile. Are there any steps you recommend, Kat, for people that want to start putting this into play on what they can start doing?
Yeah, so I would say, uh, again, that authenticity piece, I think you can't go too far away from like your core values. So I think like
Mm.
taking a look at like your core values of what you are as a business, if you are, I don't know, an insurance institution or something, and you suddenly are starting to like crack wild jokes on TikTok, it probably is going to like not really gel. So I think like humor is always the example that people use, but there's lots of other things that you can do to try and like show your emotional value and like show what you stand for as a company and evoke an emotional response in people. And so try and make sure that it does actually still sound like and fits your brand voice. I also think what I was saying about understanding your core audience. So understanding your core audience and understanding, you know, what their day-to-day lives look like where, like, again, so that may literally be as well, like, so if you want to start experimenting on TikTok, for example,
Yep.
or you think, nope, they're primarily going to be in LinkedIn, understanding where they're actually going to be, but again, understanding their pain points as well. I do think pain points is quite a good way. I mean, that's quite an easy win if you can go in and sort of address that and make people feel like, oh, they really get it, they really understand it. I think as well, another nice thing to do, as you said, is to share lots of information as well, because again, even just by being helpful, it's like having that inbound sort of strategy of sharing lots of information and not even having it gated. I think we're even moving away from like gated sharing of information now. It's about like creating that response in the person to think, oh wow, Sam Dunning always has loads of information. He knows exactly what he's talking about. We'll be doing business with him. That's what you want to be creating. You can use that as a soundbite, Sam, if you want as well.
1% of the time I do, yeah.
I think you're selling yourself short.
No, I like the examples. So yeah, understanding your audience, understanding who you want to attract, who you want to build trust with, who you're looking to convert is key. Yeah, problems, pain points, I think, is what the amount of businesses that I speak to, and when we're at Web Choice, that can't clearly define the exact problem they solve and for the exact market,
Yeah,
is outstanding. Like it shocks me that
yeah,
experienced marketers, experienced business owners are not sure on the problem, the key 2 or 3 problems they fix, and the persona. So I think if you
yeah,
haven't done that, then you need to start talking to your best current class customers or target customers and understand what are those main juicy problems they came to you with to fix, because that is gold. That is stuff that you can leverage on your homepage or landing page. Because like you said, benefits are okay, but in my opinion anyway, problems, juicy problems, like bleeding neck problems that a guy called Louis Grenier quoted on Everybody Hates Marketers, are just so good for all forms of marketing, whether that's your website, landing pages, whether that's for LinkedIn ads. If you can really know those top 2 or 3 issues that people
Yeah.
come to you with, then that makes killer content, because you can build so many stories and videos and pieces of content, blog articles around addressing those points. So it's something that it's just marketing 101.
Yeah.
And then a lot of off that will spill a lot of questions and things that you can address with content. So it's so important. And then, like you mentioned, not getting content. I think, yes, it's a fair point. I think far too much content these days is gated that might not need to be. I think, like on many podcasts these days, they share that the marketing qualified lead, the enter your email address for this ebook is hopefully slowly phasing out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a different one. I think it's something that's going to take a few years for companies to take this
Yeah.
shift.
Of course it will. But I think another thing as well, just to add in, is typically in B2B, we spoke about it earlier, there's a heavy risk aversion. So people are sometimes like, well, we have always done it this way. We do not want to change and start. We don't want to experiment with new channels. We don't want to experiment with a new tone, a new brand voice. And that's completely a normal reaction because people don't like change, and that's fine. So what I have always found to be really helpful in that moment is to, number one, present data that supports your argument. And luckily, in this particular instance, there is heaps of data that you can find now that will support you in that this is this is a strategy that is going to bring value to your business. So you can get all of that information that will support your argument. Then I think if you sort of say, we are going to change our brand voice and do X, Y, and Z, and it's going to be great, people will not like that as well. So again, what I typically do is put a sort of a framework around it. So say, we would like to experiment on this channel for 6 months, and we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Put some parameters around it. Then also say like what your hypothesis is, and say what I hypothesize is that at the end of this 6 months, I will have grown the followership. I will have like increased, the leads to the funnel, whatever it is, and give them tangible value that you think that you can deliver as well. If you're feeling extremely confident, I also think it's really good to maybe like present a result that's appealing to them. But if you're very confident you can deliver more than that, go a little bit under so that you can really like smash it at the end of that 6 months then and go like, okay, well, look, we've concluded this test that we ran on LinkedIn where we're trying to generate more emotional emojis rather than like just the likes or whatever. This is the impact that it's had on the funnel, blah, 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 and then roll it out from there. I think so often people can get, I mean, myself as well in my own career, 100 million times, get so excited by something that you're like, oh, I want to go all guns blazing, and people just will not go for that. So putting things into parameters, framing things as a test is really, really good. And then just on that testing side as well, if you do get a little bit more flexibility and you are able to test, this is something you should definitely play around with and experiment with. So I think like experiment with your tone of voice. And again, I always say that this is where social media is really handy for marketers, because other forms of marketing typically are a lot slower to put together. It's, a little bit like they last longer. So there is a little bit more risk involved. Whereas with social media, you've got that feed, it's moving fast. You can, of course, use a tool like Sprout Social to analyze how your social feeds are actually performing. And you'll be able to very quickly see, okay, this type of tone is working better, like this time of day is working better. And this is the style of content that we should move forward and apply to other channels. And you can analyze all of that, which is just crazy that you can analyze things like, how emotional your marketing is. I think it's really, really exciting. But yeah, I think experimentation, and I believe in your birthday post that you put on LinkedIn there, Sam, I was saying it was your birthday the other day and you did a great post about 32 lessons. I believe you did say be experimental in there, didn't you? I think so.
Yeah.
You
Experimenting is
believe in
something
this?
I love. Like I completely agree with you. I don't think enough companies try experiments because, like you say, a lot of businesses, not all, but many are scared to do or scared to break the trend. They kind of know what's working okay for them, but they think if they try something new, they might have issues. But the thing is, with the way that B2B and the rate that marketing moves, like if you're not experimenting, you are going to fall behind and revenue is going to be impacted. And especially with the state that B2B tech companies are right now, like companies are having layoffs left, right, and center, funding issues falling through, and all this stuff. So if you're not trying new channels with small tests, then you're gonna see you're not gonna be here too much longer, because yeah, it's one of those things. And like you've just laid out a really nice way that you can get buy-in, it sounds like, from the rest of your team. So if you're dealing with upper management and you need to put a case forward, if you can look into something, provide some industry stats, if you can back it up with a hypothesis, some data, and say, look, we're going to do a 4-month, 6 months test, here's what we think will happen. Can we get some flexibility? Can we get some budget around this? And then if it works, great, we ramp it up. If not, at least we've tried it, we learn, we move on to the next one.
Absolutely.
Which is, I think it's just good business, really. Because if you're relying on everything that's working now, what's to say that you're doing really well on LinkedIn, but perhaps the algorithm changes, or Twitter or Facebook or whatever it is, or likewise, maybe email marketing starts flopping. And if you've got a range of channels that can build brand, build awareness, build trust, and drive inbound and drive revenue, if you can slowly creep those up, then it's only going to help, right?
Oh, 100%. And like, I think if you're working, anyone who's working in digital marketing knows that this is a field that is changing like weekly, if not daily. It sometimes feels hourly, it's changing a lot. And so you have to sort of keep your finger on the pulse and keep trying things. I totally agree with you. I think the reason I feel like there's just a perception that maybe people who are ultimately signing off on the larger decisions, who maybe don't work in digital marketing, but like, maybe peek into that world. They're just seeing, I don't know, BTS on TikTok or something, and they're like, what? This has got nothing to do with my business. And they don't understand how they can be connected. And obviously, everything that is absolutely bursting at the forefront of like any sort of marketing evolution, where, B2B is going to be a wee bit further behind that, and it will be iterated to fit B2B. It's not going to be like what you're going to see influencers doing, or what you're going to see like just general users doing. It's going to be iterated to fit the actual market and the use case. So that's
Sure.
why I think the fear is there a little bit, because they're like, I don't understand this, so we can't fit into it, but it won't be the same as that.
Yeah. Some good points. I mean, there's one big example that experimentation is the way to go. Is that Chris Walker over at Refine Labs has pretty much shifted his whole business model into research and development for the B2B
Oh,
tech
wow.
space. So it kind of shows you that that's one way things are going. Not that that necessarily has to follow for every other B2B or tech company, but it's interesting. And I think like we've discussed there, experimentation is something that even if you're a marketer and you're in an organization that perhaps won't let you do it or won't let you have budget, I'd say perhaps move to one that might, or start your own experiments on
Whew.
the side as a side
Yeah.
hustle. Like if you don't want to take that kind of risk, then do something you're passionate about on the side and see how
Yeah.
it goes. Like start a podcast, start your own website, start your own blog, build a mini Shopify store. Because these kind of skills are hugely worthwhile
Yeah.
for your own self-development, business sense, seeing what works in marketing. And it's only going to help you in later careers when you can bring these as experiments that you've learnt from, won with, failed with, to other future employers, or even starting your own org. So it's super
Yeah.
sound advice, that.
Totally. And I feel like, yeah, who is not going to be, attracted to someone who can say on their CV, I experimented in X, Y, and Z, like in my own time? That shows
Mm,
passion, that shows like the ability to experiment with things. I also think, and I know it's incredibly cliche, but again, it's totally okay if things fail. If you try
mm.
something and it doesn't work, you come
Yeah,
away
yeah.
with learnings for it. I think it's better to do that than to not try things. But like, again, with this one, I honestly, just all of the data, all of the reports, they all just point to it being such an easy win that is just overlooked. That this is something I could be bleating on for days, for weeks about this subject, because I'm so passionate about it.
Good stuff. Well, yeah, with that, Kat, I want to thank you very much for coming on, sharing why getting prospects emotional with B2B marketing is so important. Enjoyed the conversation. So please do tell our audience where they can learn more about yourself. Sprout Social in any way you'd like to send them to.
Yeah, well, I would love if you wanted to find out a little bit more about Sprout Social, sproutsocial.com. We'll tell you a little bit about like our software, our service, and what we provide for you and how we can help your business take its social media strategy and its business strategy to the next level. But it's also absolutely chock-a-block with a resources section where there is a blog that has got every topic, every single problem you could possibly imagine. We've got some answers for. We also run loads and loads of webinars, and we actually have a really great one coming up next month called How to Engage Gen Z with TikTok, which is also another big juicy subject that I think a lot of marketers are a little bamboozled by. As for myself, I'm always on LinkedIn, frankly. So yeah, name's Kat Anderson. If you have any questions at all, please reach out. I'd be happy to talk to you.
Awesome. We'll put all of those links on the show notes over at businessgrowth.marketing. With that, thanks once again. Cheers, Kat.
Thanks, Sam. Bye.
No worries. And as always, if you enjoyed today's episode, a quick rating or review on Apple Podcasts goes a long way. Or if you're on YouTube, a quick subscribe is appreciated. And we'll catch you on the next one for more no BS, actionable B2B marketing tips to grow your business, grow revenue. Catch you on the next one.